Welcome back to the Der Show. Lots of news. We'll obviously talk about what happened in Boulder and the District of Columbia, but there's also news in Russia. Ukraine has taken offensive action, defensive, obviously, in the last analysis against the Russians, and the Russians will obviously retaliate. And it does not look like there will be an obvious a deal. Not sure there'll be a deal in Gaza. Not sure there'll be a deal in Iran. And I'm sure President Trump must be very frustrated. He is the deal maker. And, it's a lot easier to make a deal about real estate than it is a deal with countries that believe that existentially they're very existence is at stake, which is both Israel and Ukraine. Obviously, Russia doesn't feel that way, and Iran doesn't feel that way. Iran's not going to go out of existence. Russia's not going to go out of existence. But Israel and Ukraine are both in great danger. If Iran were to develop a nuclear bomb, it would probably at some point use it against Israel. Israel has its defenses, but you can overwhelm defenses, and no country should have to take a chance that its defenses will prevent 3 million people from being killed by a nuclear holocaust. So a lot of things up in the air. I think we've rarely lived in my adult life in a more dangerous time. Mostly because of the provocations of Russia on the one hand and of Hamas on the other hand. Also, China is waiting in the wings to see when it has an opportunity to go into Taiwan, and what will the United States do. Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State have made it clear that we could not accept a military attack on Taiwan. And of course, if there is a military attack on any NATO nations, we are obliged by treaty to respond. So we're living in very, very dangerous times. This is not quite the 1930s, but it is the 1950s when, Korea and a little later on Vietnam, we went through such a golden age where there didn't seem to be all that much danger on all sides, but I think now we're seeing a considerable amount of danger. What I want to talk about today, though, are the killings that occurred in Washington, D.C. Last week. 2 young people, one a Christian, one a Jew, both working for the Israeli embassy, were murdered in cold blood by somebody yelling "Free Palestine" from Jews. Free Palestine, I don't know what that means, but and then in Boulder, Colorado, an Egyptian man who was illegally in the United States tried to burn Jews, 9 of them. I don't know if all of them are Jews, but they were all attending a demonstration in favor of the hostages, bring the hostages home. Whenever I hear Free Palestine, my response is always, free the hostages. They're really imprisoned. Palestine's not imprisoned. It could have had a state like 7 times since Israel came into an existence. So it's not, free what? But these hostages have to be freed. And so I want to see the hostages freed. So what's going on with these killings? Look, as you know, because I've said this on the show over and over again, I've written it. It's the thesis of my new book, The Preventive State, which, by the way, has become an Amazon bestseller in a number of categories, and I really urge you all to buy it and read it. I think you'll find it good. In the preventive state, I mean, the basic thesis is that you can prevent things from happening by using the right criteria. And when you have people pushing and shoving and engaged in violence and holding janitors hostage, like occurred in Colombia, the line between that kind of violence and going and buying a gun or buying a fire maker of some kind and shooting Jews or burning them, that line is not a thick one. I mean, we saw what happened in Nazi Germany in the 30s. It started by, Jews being relegated to second-class citizenship, denied access to universities, denied access to jobs, denied the ability to leave the country, obviously, was the most important. And then that was the 30s. And then we saw what happened in the 40s. And so I'm not suggesting that we're going to see that happening in this country, but I am suggesting that you can predict violence when you not only tolerate but encourage the kind of things that Harvard has been encouraging. Let me tell you just a little story about, people say, oh, it's not Harvard. It's not Harvard. Maybe it's the Divinity School and the Public Health School. Let me tell you what Harvard did last week at its graduation. At its graduation last week, it gave an honorary degree. It only gives like a handful of honorary degrees to the most distinguished people in the world. It gave an honorary degree to a woman who has called for a academic boycott against Israel. In other words, has said that cancer researchers should not work with Israeli scientists who may be on the verge of developing cures for cancer. They shouldn't work with academics like me or who support Israel. And this woman, this bigot, got an honorary doctorate. Can you imagine Harvard giving an honorary doctorate to anybody who said, let's boycott South Africa, or now Black South Africa, or let's boycott gay organizations? But Harvard University, I'm not talking about a school, Harvard University, the corporation, the Harvard Corporation voted to give an honorary degree to this bigoted, horrible woman. And I think a lot of people didn't know what she stood for. So I think people would have walked out and booed. But only after, the honorary degree is a secret. Nobody knows who's going to get them until they're given out. A handful of faculty the night before are invited to a dinner. I've been invited to that dinner. But it's secret. The media doesn't know about it. And so the audience didn't know who this woman was. She just was a woman with an obscure name. But then as soon as she got her degree, people went online and said, oh my God, that's the same woman. She said good things about the head of North Korea. And she said terrible things about Israel. And basically is called for a boycott of Jewish Israelis. She doesn't call for a boycott of Israelis who are Arabs or Muslim, but Jewish Israelis come under the boycott. And that's who got an honorary degree. That's Harvard. Let me tell you another story. So my book has just come out, The Preventive State, and we decided where to have the book launch. Every book has a book launch. And the book launch that we decided on after a lot of conversation was the Harvard Club of New York. And so it was scheduled. The invitations went out. We ordered the books. And then all the people who were invited, I didn't get a notice, but all the people who were invited said it was canceled. It was canceled. And then it lied and it said, we're working with the author to try to reschedule. First, they didn't even tell me. I found out about it through other people. And second, when I called and said, can we reschedule? They said, no, we're too busy. So obviously, my book launch of The Preventive State was canceled, either from pressure by members of the Harvard Club or heads of the Harvard Club, or by people at Harvard University itself. They're stating that it was a scheduling conflict is just a lie. I checked it out. I called them and I said, what's the scheduling conflict? Well, we're just busy, but what's in conflict with that day? Why can't we have it that day? Well, we don't know. We can't tell you. Totally unsatisfactory answer. Clearly, this was a decision to censor me. I think they may have been afraid that I would talk about Harvard. I wasn't even planning to talk about Harvard. I was planning to talk about the preventive state. Obviously, I have plenty to say about Harvard, and I will continue to talk about Harvard, and I won't be stopped. I won't be censored. Members of the Harvard Club won't have a chance to hear me, and I'd be interested in knowing what they thought. But if you're a member of the Harvard Club, protest, object, and don't believe them when they say it was a scheduling conflict. That's just nonsense. They're just lying through their teeth, just as they lied when they sent out a statement saying we're working with the speaker to reschedule. I didn't even know about it. So they weren't working with the speaker to reschedule. They just preemptively canceled me, obviously, as the result of pressure. I have absolutely no doubt about that. And I spoke to the man who canceled me, and boy, did he fumf, and we couldn't come up with a single good answer and explanation. He couldn't tell me what the scheduling conflict was. He couldn't reschedule it. Obviously, he was a lackey who was under instructions from somebody above him, whether from Harvard or from the Harvard Club. Do not schedule Dershowitz. We do not want him to speak. He has sided with Trump on his conflict with Harvard. I haven't sided with anybody. I want to see a settlement. I am writing a book called Trump to Harvard, Go Fund Yourself, and maybe with a subtitle, Harvard to Trump, sue me, or sue you. And who will win? We don't know. We haven't come up with the final title yet, but we know that the title itself will be Trump to Harvard, Go Fund Yourself. So, they may have found out about that and they don't like that, but Harvard has no right to cancel the Harvard Club, a scheduled event. Look, let's remember about the Harvard Club. When I went to Harvard, when I started to teach at Harvard, they weren't admitting women. I wouldn't join the Harvard Club because they weren't admitting women. 20, 30 years earlier, they weren't admitting Jews. They weren't admitting Catholics. So the Harvard Club has a scandalous history, as all these clubs, the Yale Club, the Princeton Club, they all have the same kind of scandalous anti-Semitic, anti-Catholic, anti-women bigotry. But you'd think maybe it ended. But obviously, don't expect to speak at the Harvard Club, even if you're scheduled, if you have said things that might be offensive to certain people in the Harvard or Harvard Club establishment. So if you're in the Harvard Club, if you're a member, if you're going to have lunch there, let them know what you think. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, fine. If you think they should have canceled me, fine. If you believe that they did it for a scheduling purpose, then you're a fool. But they won't even show you if you ask them what the scheduling conflict is, because there was no scheduling conflict. Okay. So let's talk about the subject at hand. What we saw now is shooting of two innocent people, one a Christian, one a Jew, both of whom work for the Israeli embassy. And now we are seeing burnings. We saw 8 people taken to the hospital with burns, some severe, some less severe, by an Egyptian Muslim, presumably, who overstayed his visa and was illegally in the United States. He's now been charged with multiple counts of attempted murder. The initial reaction of Boulder, which is a left-wing, political woke city, the first reaction, well, maybe it wasn't a terrorist attack. No, maybe the FBI immediately said, it's a terrorist attack. The guy was screaming, flee Palestine, and burning Jews. It's a terrorist attack. No, the Boulder, don't rush to judgment. Maybe it was a matrimonial dispute between one guy and 8 women or 8 people, 8 elderly people. No, it was a terrorist attack. Let's be clear. Just like the attack in DC was a terrorist attack. And there are going to be more of them, as I predicted. I predicted the attack in DC in my book, The Preventive State. I predicted it in other books that I've written. And I predict there'll be more now. I predict there'll be copycat offenses. As I said, when I got my honorary degree last week at a small college in Florida, the security people had to give me special instructions about how to evacuate in the event of an attack on me, and they surrounded me with guns. The car that drove me to the event had machine guns. I'm not used to that, but I'm a target, obviously. I now have much better security, and so if anybody comes after me, as the Bible says, if somebody comes to shoot you, rise up and kill him first. Or the Bible doesn't talk about shooting, but if somebody comes to kill you, rise up and kill him first. That's the preventive state. I believe in that. If you can prevent yourself from being killed, or you can prevent your country from being bombed, do it. Make sure you do it right. Make sure you do it proportionately. Make sure you do it with appropriate jurisprudential guardrails, but do it. Don't allow yourself to be victimized. And I think too many people have allowed themselves to be victimized for too long. And Jews are among them. In the 1930s, Jewish leaders did not speak out. They cared more about their own comfort. That was led by Temple Emanuel in New York, one of the most disgraceful institutions in American and Jewish history, historically. I mean, the home of the New York Times, the home of CNN. The Temple Emanuel in New York has been on the forefront of fomenting and tolerating anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. They have also banned me. I can't speak at Temple Emmanuel Peter Beinart, who doesn't believe in Israel's right to exist, was paid $35,000 to deny Israel's right to exist by Temple Emmanuel, but I was not allowed to speak there even free because they don't like the fact that I defended Donald Trump, and they don't like the fact that my views on Israel are different from theirs. I actually support Israel and defend Israel, and they have much more nuanced views about the right of Israel to exist as a nation state of the Jewish people. Temple Emmanuel and the Reform movement of Judaism, many of them opposed the establishment of the state of Israel. They founded an organization that was expressly opposed to Israel's founding. And so, Temple Emmanuel has a lot to answer for, and it's part of the problem, not part of the solution. And so we need new leadership. America needs more civil liberties leadership that is attuned to the needs of all groups. I have an article I've just written today and just submitted in which I say the greatest civil rights, human rights, and civil liberties struggle of this decade is the right of Jews to a single standard. We Jews, we've defended the rights of blacks, we've defended the rights of gays, we've defended the rights of women. What's happened now? Gay organizations, black organizations, many women organizations, particularly lesbian organizations, have come out strongly against Israel in every possible way. Transgender organizations have come out against Israel. And I say in my article that the single biggest human rights, civil liberties, and civil rights struggle today is not for black rights. That's on the right trajectory. That's going in the right direction. It's not gay rights. That's going in the right direction. The only human rights that are going in the wrong direction are the rights of Jews and the rights of Jews who support a Jewish state. That trajectory is going in the wrong direction. So if you really honestly believe in civil liberties and civil rights, you have to get on the bandwagon and support Jewish human rights, Jewish civil liberties, the rights of Zionists, non-Zionists who are Jewish, and the rights of people like the two who were shot in DC and the people who were burned in Boulder, Colorado. But has the ACLU said a word about this? No, they're on the wrong side. Have Human Rights Watch said human rights is on the wrong side? Today, civil liberties, civil rights, and human rights have become human wrongs, have become anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, and anti-American. And it's very important to recognize that right now, Jews have no group, essentially, other than other Jewish groups, defending them. And Christians, by the way. There are a lot of Christian groups that strongly support Israel and support Zionists who support Israel. So I have to give them a lot of credit. But they're relatively small compared to uninfluential on college campuses. The influential groups on college campuses today are almost all anti-Israel. On the day after, October 7th, 30, I don't remember, 31, 32, 33 groups, including Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch. It's human wrongs, not human rights. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, all of these groups came out against Israel. Amnesty International actually signed a petition against Israel, blaming October 7th on Israel. And so, we have a lot of work to do. And if you consider yourself a human rights activist, a human rights advocate, an advocate of civil liberties, you have to be on the side of the most discriminated against group in the history of the world, the longest enduring bigotry, and that is anti-Semitism. Started in the earliest biblical days and continued, obviously, through the early days of Christianity, early days of Islam, continued Inquisition, the Holocaust. These are persistent antagonism toward Jews way before Israel was established, way before Zionism was established. There was this kind of bigotry. So don't blame it on Israel. Don't blame it on Zionism. That's a cover. Anti-Semitism, anti-Judaism, anti-Jewishness has been in the forefront of bigotry since the beginning of recorded history, and it hasn't stopped. There was a golden age, probably in 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. It happened to correspond to the years I was at Harvard. So I didn't see a lot of anti-Semitism at Harvard. I saw some, and I called them out on it. When I first came to Harvard, a Jew could not be made a dean of any college or a school. A Jew could not be made a president. Catholics were being discriminated against. Ethnic Catholics, Italian Catholics, Irish Catholics, British Catholics, not so. But ethnic Catholics, yes. And I fought against them with equal vigor, and that stopped. And Yale had an Italian American who was the president, and Harvard has had Jewish presidents. Yale had a Jewish president, and so there was a golden age. But that golden age surely stopped 10 years ago. Coincidence that it stopped literally the day I retired from Harvard, and the day that Ruth Weiss, who was another very active pro-Israel Jew on the faculty, retired. We retired the same year, and that was the beginning of the terrible age of anti-Semitism and bigotry at Harvard. But it's getting worse, and it's going to continue to get worse because the students who are today getting their graduation, making these horrible speeches. For example, the president of the MIT student body submitted a speech to allow her to speak, and the school accepted the speech. And then she defrauded them and cheated them and lied to them and gave a different speech condemning Israel in every possible way. And so she's been banned from graduation. She should have her degree withheld. Nobody should graduate MIT who is engaged in the kind of fraud which, if she were in the commercial market, she'd go to jail for. It's bait and switch. It's a bait and switch. That's a crime in the commercial context. But at MIT, well, she's not going to be able to go to graduation, but she's still going to get a degree. She shouldn't get a degree. The same thing is true with some Harvard speakers, and the idea that the class marshal at the divinity school should be somebody who is accused of pushing and shoving and assaultive conduct, and that Harvard Law School should give a $65,000 scholarship to one of the thugs who pushed and shoved, and that he would get a job in the public defender. By the way, speaking about public defender, I'm a big supporter of public defenders. I am myself. I'm a private public defender. Let me tell you what's going on with public defender organizations around the country. They're becoming hotbeds of anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, anti-Israel, anti-Jewish issues. The Bronx Defenders is probably the worst, but other defenders organizations around the country have become captive by hard left woke political people who see their job primarily as undercutting the government rather than defending the rights of individuals. So I'm no longer a fan of many of the public defenders organizations. I strongly support the concept of public defense, just as I support the concept of Black Lives Matters. But I think the Black Lives Matter organization has become the most destructive organization in modern American history. It has caused more of our problems than almost any other organization. The same thing is true with gay rights. I support strongly gay rights, but many gay rights organizations, many transgender rights organizations have become hotbeds of anti-Semitism, anti-Americanism, and anti-Christianity. So we live in a complicated world at a complicated time. You'll always hear about it here, honestly and straightforward. So keep listening, and please, 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 if you have a chance, buy my book, The Preventive State. I've been banned. The New York Times won't review my book because I defended Trump. The 92nd Street Y won't allow me to launch it there, which I have done for years because I defended Trump. Obviously, other places won't. So if you really want to fight back against that, go on Amazon, buy my book, The Preventive State. If it becomes a bestseller, it really will send a message to those who are trying to cancel and ban me. And I will contribute any proceeds that I get from your buying the book to charity. So I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing this in order to make a point about being canceled. And I have been canceled, and I am in the process of being canceled, ranging from the Harvard Club of New York to the Harvard Law School faculty that won't invite me to speak about this book. I think this is one of the most important books written in the last decade or several decades about the law. But because I defended Trump, the Harvard Law School faculty will not invite me to speak about this book. And it is denying the students at Harvard Law School the right to hear my views on this book. You can agree or disagree. The book itself is not about Trump. It's about a change in the way we are approaching law-life policy in a preventive way. It deals with issues that are important to Trump, like deportation, which used to be called exile. But the cancellation of me at places like Harvard and places like 92nd Street Y and places like Temple Emmanuel have to be fought back. And the best way to fight back is to send for my book and buy it from Amazon. So I'd appreciate if you do that. Thanks. All right. Let's look at some letters. Well, the first letter is about the book. I received your book from Amazon on the day it was released. I'm taking my time, even reading certain paragraphs out loud, because I want to carefully absorb anything you have written. Thank you very much for writing this more than timely book. It is a very timely book because it deals with a lot of the issues that are in the news. Obviously, the decision whether to attack Iran's nuclear facility is the most critical preventive decision we face, and there's a whole chapter in the book about that. My previous question about Iran hasn't been responded. Why Israel did not destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities in response to Iran's missile attack? That was an ideal occasion for a massive retaliation targeting the same sites that Israel is now engaged. I think you're right. I think they should have done it then, but they didn't do it then. And now they may be beholden to President Trump and what he wants and whether he wants a deal. Congratulations on another honorary degree. Any idea how many you have now? Well, I had 12 before I defended Trump. Since I defended Trump, I've gotten one from a small, relatively conservative college, but I'm not getting more honorary degrees. Having once defended Trump, that's really the end of honorary degrees for me. Thank you for your honest critique of Harvard. I, too, have a 60-year association there. Good. This is a good one. Professor Dershowitz, would not a Palestinian state deter Iran from attacking Israel with a nuclear weapon? If Israel is a one-bomb state, aren't Palestinian inhabitants also a one-bomb target? It's an interesting point. Of course, a Palestinian state wouldn't be in the center of Israel. They could attack Tel Aviv or Haifa, or probably not Jerusalem. Jerusalem would be very close to the West Bank, but who knows? Strategic, tactical nuclear weapons could be more focused and more targeted. But it's a very, very interesting point, and I appreciate it. Dear Alan, I would really like to understand why the school is allowing intimidation, coercion, and even violence against people of a particular faith. Is this not a violation of civil rights laws? And if so, why are they not being charged and prosecuted? It is a violation of civil rights laws. I know because I helped draft one of the civil rights rules that extended violation of civil rights beyond race and gender to religion and national origin, and specifically covering Jews. So yes, it is a violation of law, but university administrators don't want to call in the police, and they don't want to in any way anger their students who have a different view of this. And so I think we're going to see a lot more toleration of this kind of thing. Alan, enjoyed your discussion of foreign students. Like your mention, Harvard chose to listen to Larry Tribe versus you, and Larry Tribe was wrong again. When is Larry Tribe ever right? Well, almost all of his predictions have been false. Remember, he was the one who urged the Supreme Court and other courts not to allow Trump to run for president because he led an insurrection. Of course, that turned out, I think, to be 9-0 wrong. So Tribe's been wrong just about everything, and yet the law school, the university administration is listening to him more than they're listening to more sensible views. And so I'm hoping that they will listen to more sensible views and will sit down and negotiate, because that's the obvious resolution here, a negotiated resolution. Again, the title of a book that's forthcoming, probably in a couple of months, is Trump to Harvard, Go Fund Yourself. Harvard response, sue you. We're not sure what title we'll use, but something along those lines. And then the subtitle is Who Will Win? And the answer is Trump will win in the long term because he has much of the power, along with the legislature, not the courts, to restrict funding and to restrict visas. So it's a losing battle for Harvard, and they ought to sit down and negotiate. That's been my advice, but Harvard hasn't accepted that advice up to now. Maybe that's why they canceled me at the Harvard Club of New York. But if you're a member of the Harvard Club of New York, protest like hell because they're just dead wrong. See you tomorrow.